Hollywood Network. I'm your host, Winston Gilchrist, and this is called the Gilchrist Experience. Today's subject matter is very up to date. We're going to talk about 9/11 and the conspiracy and all these other questions that have been asked by a lot of people about what happened at 9/11, the CIA, what were their involvement. You have to fast forward. Oh, okay. Never mind. Well, today's guest is Graham Weatherspoon. As usual, I get confused about my directions and not concentrating on what we're doing here. What we're going to talk about basically is the responsibility and who was responsible for whether it was a plan, a well mapped out plan. We have tapes to show that the CIA was involved in this. And what is your take on this, Graham? You were down at the World Trade Center, and the reason why I'm nervous is because we were talking about a subject matter that takes a lot of proof, and there's a lot of people saying, where do you get this information about the CIA selling drugs, the CIA supporting the U.S. economy with the drug money? These sort of topics are going to be shown to you, how I find out. And welcome to the Gilchrist Experience. My guest again is my colleague and future producer, all right, Graham Weatherspoon from 100 Blacks in Law Enforcement Who Care. Welcome to the show again, Graham. Well, what about this subject matter about, I don't usually stutter, but when I say the CIA is responsible for this sort of stuff, we have to be very careful when we talk about. But you've told me about this several times, but actually seeing actual footage and this Roland that we have is a detective that's been 23 years exposing this. Matter of fact, his whole entire family were Secret Service people. And we know about, you were telling me something about Bush being CIA. And we all know about the CIA selling drugs in the Vietnam era. So why should it stop now, when Bush was head of that CIA at the time? So why shouldn't it transfer to this whole situation that we have now, and the whole planning of the destruction of the Twin Towers by our government? Is this possible?
We have to remember that the United States government is a corporation. That's what a government is. It's a corporation. It's about generating revenue, making money, and not just for the people that live within its borders, but on the international scene as well.
Mm-hmm.
Clandestine behavior is part of every government. And if we understand, number one, that we don't live in a democracy, we live in a republic.
Mm-hmm.
Politicians are quick to talk about democracy, a democracy. This has never been a democracy. From its inception, this has been a republic. Mm-hmm. The argument over the Pledge of Allegiance, in that pledge, and to the republic for which it stands,
right,
not to the democracy. This is a republic. It's a representative government. In Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, he asked the question whether or not this republic could withstand so great a civil war.
Mm-hmm.
This is a republic. So we need to understand that the people do not run the government. And the government itself is run by select people.
Mm.
With regard to not just the CIA, the FBI, or the NSA, we need to understand that the public operates at the behest of those who run this corporation. Back in the days when, the days of Camelot, when John Kennedy
mm-hmm.
was elected, John Kennedy and the United States government worked hand in hand with the mafia. Now,
right, which we find out now.
Sure. Governor Cuomo said that there was no mafia. There was no Cosa Nostra, organized crime,
And
whatever they want to call it.
And he wouldn't run for president because of his family ties
Well,
to
I'm
the
not
mafia.
even going to get into his family ties, but the fact is that the United States government and the mafia worked hand in hand in some of their clandestine operations. Mm-hmm. And one way in which they did that was with regard to Fidel Castro mm-hmm. and Havana, Cuba, and the Bay of Pigs.
Mm-hmm.
people jump up and down this Elian Gonzalez case that we had early last year.
Yeah.
You know, we need to remember that this was a boy who was taken from his home by his mother and his mother's boyfriend, put on a raft in the Atlantic Ocean.
Right.
Now, if you or I did that, we'd be arrested, if for nothing else, for recklessly endangering the welfare of a child.
ACS would be on your
Okay?
case.
Custodial interference. There are a
Right.
lot of things you can look
course.
at, but we need to understand that man had rights
Mm-hmm.
to his child. No woman is no more the parent of a child than the father is.
Okay.
That was not her child, that was their child.
Mm-hmm.
Now, she lost her life along with her boyfriend, but Ilion survived. And people were screaming about he ought to be raised here. Well, listen, if the United States was so great, the entire world would live here. The entire world, the vast majority of the world doesn't live here. And a lot of people don't want to live here. That's another story. But we had Fidel Castro, who's made out to be the evil doer of the Western Hemisphere.
Mm-hmm.
And they've been calling him that since 1959. But people don't know the history.
And then you're comparing that to Florida?
The CIA, yeah.
Okay.
The CIA back in the 50s operated in Cuba
Mm-hmm.
and operates globally. It also operated in a little place called the Turks and Caicos. Now,
The Turks?
The Turks and Caicos, Grand Turk Island in the Turks and Caicos, is in close proximity to Cuba.
Okay.
And I was in Grand Turk a few years ago. I'll
Mhm.
say a few years ago.
Okay.
There is still a CIA base of operation there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the Bay of Pigs was not just a U.S. military operation, it was an organized crime operation in conjunction with the United States government. Why? Because in Havana, Cuba, you had the business dealings of the United States government and various corporations and organized crime
Right.
where they could fly 90 miles off the coast,
To pick up drugs.
not just to pick up drugs, but to do their bidding and their deals.
Okay.
Why? Because the United States had no jurisdiction over anything going on in Cuba. All right? So legally, if we're businessmen doing business off the continent of the United States in another country, and even if it's illegal, they can't be touched. They can have their meeting and fly back home and have dinner with their wife at 5, 6 o'clock in the evening, and who's any wiser? Because it's a short hop to Cuba. What happened was they decided they wanted to get rid of
Castro?
not Castro, of, I'm trying to remember the preceding leader I have Tito in my mind, but Tito was Yugoslavia. And,
Batista?
Batista, thank you.
Batista.
Now, they solicited Fidel Castro because they believed that he had been whitened in his thinking because he was educated here.
Your analogy has been Latin and Bush today?
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, okay.
Well, let's
So-
update. Let's
But
update.
let me just
Okay.
bring it to a quick conclusion on that with that part. See, once they helped Fidel Castro get into power,
Right.
Fidel told them to take their garbage and get off the
Right,
island.
exactly.
Take the prostitutes, take their drugs,
Right.
take their illegal
Right.
dealings, and take their racist propaganda.
Right.
Because black Cubanos, like myself,
Mm-hmm.
could not get a decent job in Cuba.
That's right.
You could only sweep streets and
Right.
clean toilets.
Right.
But the fair-skinned, bright-eyed, straight-haired Cubans, who were led to believe that they were white, had all the good jobs.
Right.
Okay? So when Fidel Castro came in, he did away with all that.
Right.
So Kennedy now made him out to be an evil man.
Mm-hmm.
He had the Bay of Pigs, which was a massive failure. But the CIA was involved. The CIA was over in Iraq, trying to do a number on Saddam Hussein years ago with the Kurds. And what happened? The CIA abandoned the Kurds. And Saddam Hussein did what any ruler would do when there's an uprising. He crushed it. 9,000 people were killed. But the CIA was not there to help those people that the United States coaxed into this uprising. They abandoned them.
Is this before they start selling arms to Saddam
No,
Hussein?
this was after. This was
After he sold.
They've been selling arms to Saddam and all of these people for the longest time.
All right.
We need to be very well aware of the fact that the United States and the Israelis are the largest munitions dealers in the world.
Okay.
They sell more guns and they're the greatest mercenaries of death on the planet, the United States and the Israelis. I was in Antigua in 1990, and a freighter was coming through the Caribbean seeking the rights to dock and refuel while en route to South Africa, to the apartheid regime. And they were transporting weapons for the apartheid government to kill Africans in South Africa.
Okay.
They were denied port of call throughout the Caribbean until they got to Antigua. And it was the son of the aged prime minister who allowed them to not only dock, but took a payoff, allowed their boat to be refueled to go on to South Africa to kill blacks.
Well, the question is this. Why would the CIA and the Bush administration let this, well, we know that the Bushes and the bin Ladens have been partners, business partners for years. And when the Taliban took over in Afghanistan, they stopped the poppy seed,
Right.
which was the drug flow or cash flow to the CIA to support Wall Street.
That's one of the main business deals that this government is involved in.
I mean, when you sit down and realize that the drug business is controlled by the CIA, and plus all that cash flow is supporting this economy. In other words, if the CIA, if they didn't start this war, the drugs would not have been able to come out of Afghanistan. The CIA would have been broke, and the American economy would have fell apart.
Well, we got to remember now, the CIA just doesn't look at Afghanistan in terms of making money and controlling history. We need to remember, history just doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. A lot of it is orchestrated, right?
Okay.
Patrice Lumumba was assassinated. Kwame Nkrumah was assassinated. Bishop was assassinated. And many other world leaders have been assassinated around the world by the CIA. We control.
Are they going to come get us next or what?
Well, who, the CIA?
Whoever.
Can't worry about them.
Okay.
Can't worry about them, you know.
But these
God
are
has given us a spirit of, but God has not
Amen.
given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind,
Okay.
all right? So that's not a matter. And I've already faced death a number of times, so that's not a matter
Okay,
of concern
I'm
for
ready.
me. But the Central Intelligence Agency was once headed by a man who later became the chief executive officer of the United States government, and that was George Bush. Now, one thing you don't do is put your chief assassin into your executive branch of government, but it was done. And I had mentioned to you earlier off the year when Hinckley,
Oh, yeah.
when Hinckley shot Nixon,
Listen to this one.
when Hinckley shot Nixon, that fateful day, George Bush was the vice president of the United States. On that same day, Hinckley's older brother had a dinner meeting with Jeb Bush in Texas. Hinckley, the younger brother, shoots the president, and the vice president is George Bush, former CIA director.
Right.
Hinckley's older brother and the vice president's son are meeting that same day for dinner.
Wow.
Coincidence? Maybe, by chance. Were they old friends? Definitely. You see, because George Bush and Hinckley's father were business partners in Texas back in the 60s when Bush was running his oil companies.
And this is what, 82?
1982, I believe it was.
You might mention that during the primary, during the Republican primary, the voodoo economics came from George Bush.
George Bush.
And, well, you have to remember that Reagan and Bush ran against each other in the primary, the Republican primary for presidency in 1980. And as a result, Bush was accusing Reagan of voodoo economics. And here we find out 2 years later that his brother, he might have been in cahoots to knock off the president, so he would become president. Because he wanted to become president in 80. But Reagan was smart enough to put him on the ticket.
Hinckley, what did I say?
You shot Reagan, not Nixon.
Right, now, okay. Hinckley shot Reagan, I said Nixon. Okay, thanks for the correction. We want to get the facts
Say
straight.
again?
I said, earlier I said that Hinckley shot
Reagan.
But it was Nixon. He shot Reagan. I said Nixon, but it was Reagan he shot.
Oh, I missed that.
Yeah, I missed it
Oh.
too. Okay, we want to get
Wow,
the
we're
facts-
live, so we
get the facts
can't
straight.
correct the tape, right?
Right.
But we corrected ourselves. Let's do that. Let's update now. Tell them why we're here today to talk. Do you have that rolling ready? I want to introduce you an FBI agent that has dedicated his whole life to, uncovering. He's an ex-CIA agent himself. Do we have that rolling ready? Well, let's roll the roll and we'll be right back at you. It's about 6 minutes long, and I'll give you some idea where I get this information from, okay? So it's not just out of the clear blue sky. I watch these documentaries, and they give you the information. I'll let you know where you can get these tapes also. Just stay tuned. All right, we'll be right back at you.
I almost got up there and said, hi, my name is Mike, I'm an alcoholic, but I think I'm at the wrong meeting, I guess. We're going to talk about a lot of things tonight that are very difficult, a lot of things tonight that are very challenging, a lot of things that will test and try many of us in the months and the years to come. But we're going to have a certain approach to this, and it's the only kind of approach that I have found in 23 years that works when you're challenging a government that no longer serves the interests of the people. I'd like to start off by asking a question, like a show of hands. How many people in the room tonight believe that Lee Harvey Oswald was the lone gunman and solely responsible for the murder of John F. Kennedy? Show of hands. 2 hands, and they're both joking. How many people in the room tonight believe that the war that is now taking place and getting ready to move all over the world is solely the result of the attacks on the World Trade Center on September the 11th? Okay, all right, great. The approach that we're going to take tonight is very straightforward. I was, for some short period of time, not as much as I wanted to be, an investigator with LAPD. I worked narcotics. I was loaned to detectives. I worked a homicide table. I worked a burglary table and an auto theft table for a while. And there is a procedure that you follow when you are presenting evidence. There is a way that you structure evidence to avoid speculation, and there is a way to fight this government. And before we start into the details on September the 11th, I want to show you 2 dramatic examples. I have 2 short clips of video that I would like to show you. And if we can run the first one, this will set the tone for what we're going to talk about tonight and what we're not going to talk about tonight. For 38 years, as of November 22nd, just a few days ago, we have had a videotape showing clearly that John F. Kennedy was shot from the front and not the back, where the Warren Commission says that Lee Harvey Oswald was up and behind to the right in the Texas School Book Depository. You look at this tape, and there is clear, convincing, incontrovertible evidence. Yet what good has it done us? What has it done to change the government? What has it done? What have we, meaning the American people, accomplished with this piece of video that shows his head moving backwards as a result of a bullet impact from the front of his head? It hasn't changed anything. I want you to bear that in mind, because I'm going to use the word "you" a lot tonight. And by you, I mean the American people. I'm talking to you as if I was talking to all 280 million people in this country. And I'm going to say some things that are going to be kind of backing you into a corner, and that is my direct intent. So some of the things we are not going to talk about tonight are speculations about the attacks on September the 11th. We are not going to talk about were there explosives in the building, were the planes piloted by remote control, any of those questions, because those are speculative questions that produce the same kind of results that we just saw on the tape. After 38 years, you can play that all you want, and it doesn't change anything. There are people who have been talking about the Oklahoma City bombing since it happened in 1995. We have videotape of U.S. military personnel machine gunning the Branch Davidians at Waco. We have proof up the galore. We're not here looking tonight for proof. We're not going to go home and have armchair discussions, because what's at stake now is our freedom. What's at stake now is our future. This is no more time to go home, and you'll see that before I'm through tonight. Now, there is another way to take on the government. There is another way to take on the lunacy of the mass media, and that is by using their own statements and their own evidence against them to prove that they are lying. Because if you're in this room tonight, you are probably already the choir. Our safety, our future, our liberty, our country, and maybe the planet depends upon us reaching out to the millions of people out there who are still waving the flag, still believing that this is a war like they're being sold on CNN. Now, I'm going to play another tape now, and I'm going to show you what happens when you confront the government with their own information head on. This is a confrontation I had with the Director of Central Intelligence, John Deutsch, at Locke High School in 1996 over the issue of the CIA bringing drugs into Los Angeles. I want you to watch his hands very carefully after I confront him.
Sir, the man in the leather
That's
jacket.
Congresswoman Juanita Millender McDonald of Compton.
I will be coming back
Hi.
over. I'll continue.
I am a former Los Angeles police narcotics detective, and I work South Central Los Angeles, and I will tell you, Director Deutsch, emphatically and
Can
without
you speak
equivocation,
further into the mic, sir? These mics don't seem to be...
I will tell you, Director Deutsch, as a former Los Angeles police narcotics detective, that the agency has dealt drugs throughout this country for a long time.
All right. All right. All right. Obviously, that is an answer for a lot of you. Now, can you please... All right. Now, can you please...
I refer direct...
Wait a minute.
As you can see, the hand motions were one of these, and he's all upset. Because, I mean, this is something we've known for years, that the CIA has been dealing in drugs. As I mentioned earlier in the show, the drug dealing that's been going on by the CIA has been funneling or supplying the economy of America. We're talking about billions and billions of dollars.
Well, there's a lot to be done with this money, and it also pays for other covert operations that is involving the CIA, the NSA, and other operatives, where the Congress might say that no government monies can be used, as in the reports on Mena, Arkansas, when Bill Clinton was the governor and Bush was the president, and they needed the weapons for the Contras. And Oliver North was sending the drugs up. Reed and others, former CIA agents, were flying C-130s into Mena, Arkansas.
Right.
The cocaine was offloaded by the state troopers working for Governor Clinton. And in what appeared to be chicken farms, they were building the weapons that were needed to go back to Nicaragua.
So Clinton's no better than
Clinton
Republicans.
there is no difference between the two. That is how Clinton was given the green light to run for the presidency. And this whole thing was orchestrated because we had a crack epidemic here in 1990, which took over 2,000 lives. And that's compliments of Bill Clinton. See, and I have a problem with some of these knucklehead, dark-skinned people in Harlem that have embraced this purveyor of death named Bill Clinton, who have said, oh, we want him in Harlem.
But they don't know.
We need him in Harlem.
They don't know.
You know, the stories regarding Mena have been out for a long time. And you can bury your head in the sand, but when you bury your head in the sand, something else is exposed. But you know what? It is the poor people of Harlem who are exposed. It is the poor people of Harlem who are suffering because it is the poor people of Harlem who will not be able to live and continue living in Harlem because of gentrification, and they're going to be pushed out of Harlem. Charles Rangel, who isn't qualified to sit on the toilet seat that Adam Clayton Powell sat on, he will not even be a congressman. Not that he's going to be around much longer anyway at his age. But there will be no black man representing Harlem 10 years from now. Not when prices in rents for commercial rents have gone from $800 or $1,000 a month to $8,000 and $12,000 a month because of Bill Clinton. You see, the CIA, Clinton, and Bush worked in a collaborative effort in order to get the monies that the government would not allow Oliver North and the others to use in Nicaragua. So it was through cocaine. It was young blacks and Latinos across this country who got caught up in this crack madness and the killing that went on. It was those deaths that helped to pay for George Bush's and Bill Clinton's desires to run things. As you've got to remember, the United States has its tentacles beyond the borders of this country. The United States was involved in upsetting Panama, taking Panama away from Colombia. All right? Roosevelt was involved in the coup that went on there around the turn of the century. The building of the Panama Canal, J.P. Morgan, the financier. Oh, this was a massive collaborative effort on the part of businessmen and corrupt individuals within government and the military to have the Panama Canal zone built. You can go around the world, and there isn't a country that you can name that hasn't been touched by the United States government.
Why the Twin Towers? Because of the corporations that were in the Twin Towers.
I had said before,
On this piece, well, I'm sorry I didn't get this piece to you before we came on today, because there's so much information in this piece, it's dynamite. And one of the things that he talks about in there, that most of the lawyers controlling Wall Street came from the CIA. I mean, it's amazing. He documents and tells you who's who and why they bombed the World Trade Center. How the troops were in place, and this was all organized, and I mean, this was planned 4 years ago.
You see, you can't tell me that you have a massive intelligence network.
And they knew it was going to happen.
And you don't know what's going on. We also have to remember how the Arabs are being scapegoated here.
Oh, yeah.
They're being scapegoated.
Of course.
You cannot, and I've said this repeatedly, you can't have 5 planes flying in the northeast corridor of this country. Their transponders are off. And you don't scramble the United States Air Force to find out what the devil is going on up there. You can't tell me you have planes that were apparently en route to Washington and other places, and you haven't scrambled military jets out of Andrews Air Force Base and other places to find out where these planes are.
So that plane that was headed towards the White House was shot out of the air?
You're not going to tell me that it impacted in the ground, because if a plane crashes in the ground, you're going to have an impact crater. There was no such impact crater that I know of.
So they shot down that one plane?
Scattered across a number of miles.
So you think they shot down that plane?
In my opinion, it was shot down.
Okay, all right.
Now
why
then
start
they turn around and they come up, oh, we have the passport of the guy on the plane. Just like that, they have this guy's passport the next day. That's fantastic recovery work. It's fantastic that they have the names of all these people the following day. The following day, they have all these people's names. Where the hell did you get all this information that you claim you didn't have on 9/11, but on 9/10, you have all this information? I've stated before. Now, he spoke about theories and different things, and I have theories. The Israeli Mossad, I believe, is part of this.
Well, they say so in this piece.
All right, and I've been saying that since last year.
I know.
Okay?
I know.
The Israeli Mossad had to be a part of this. This man, Silverstein, that had the lease on the World Trade Center,
Right.
he had to be a part of this.
2 months. He got
All right.
he bought the building 2 months before.
Got the lease 2 months before. He, Governor Pataki, and Chuck Schumer sat on the plaza of the World Trade Center when that lease was signed. And I kept the photograph from the Daily News, and I don't know why. I just looked at that thing, and I still have that photograph. 6 or 8 weeks prior to the fall of the building. And I cut that picture out. I didn't know why I cut it out, but there was something about these men sitting there, and I there's something going on here.
Something's happening.
This guy from Australia, this Australian Jew who has been involved in some shady dealings of his own in the past.
Oh, really? What's his name?
Silverstein.
Silverstein. Right. Okay.
All of the allegations. There were five Jews who were picked up by the FBI in New Jersey who were standing on the roof of a moving van watching as the buildings came down, jumping up and down and cheering. And they didn't know that they were being watched by a woman who called the police. I think this was in Jersey City.
What?
And they came and took these five guys, and they were held in detention. You didn't hear about this on the news. You heard about all of the Arabs that were rounded up, but you didn't hear about these five Jews that were
That was
picked up.
celebrated.
And they believed that they were part of some Israeli intelligence group.
Okay.
Okay?
That makes sense.
But the FBI couldn't prove a case. They detained them, I think, for about a month.
Mm-hmm.
They couldn't get anything on them. And they, quote unquote, had to release them, and they got on a plane and flew to Israel. Now, they detained a whole lot of Arabs in this country.
Mm-hmm.
And they've been detained more than 30 days.
Mm-hmm. But they have nothing to do with this?
There was a movie. You saw the movie The Siege that came out a couple of years ago, and I was telling people, that's not a movie. That is something that could invariably happen in this city. And it did happen after 9/11.
Even Father Lucas said that the only plane that was allowed to fly in the airspace, other than military jets, was a plane, a private Saudi jet that came and picked up the Bin Laden family and flew them back to Saudi Arabia. That was the only domestic flight that was allowed to fly.
Right.
Only
But the Bin
plane
Ladens and the Bushes are very close friends.
Yeah.
Been
They're
close
partners.
friends for
They're
years.
business partners.
And I keep saying, you've got to realize this is about business.
It's about money.
This is
Drug
oil
money and drugs.
and drugs.
Well, he says so in this piece.
All right?
He says so in this piece.
Bush is an oil man from way back.
That's right.
An oil man from way back. Cheney is an oil man. Halliburton.
Mm-hmm.
Cheney spent years in the Middle East. George W. Bush is a moron. Forget about him. He's just a pawn. You couldn't find Cheney for weeks after 9/11. Bush is
That's right.
expendable. He's a babbling idiot. He can't construct a simple sentence. His grammar is deplorable. You don't need him. He's just a figurehead. So
50
you put him
million
out there.
people voted for him.
It doesn't make, the fact that 50 million people could vote for him shows you the level of intellect of the people in this country.
They don't know the truth.
And those that voted for him, I don't need to describe them to you because you know who they are. So it tells you how intelligent they are,
Good, hard-working Americans.
okay? But this is the truth.
Well, you know, when I watch pieces like this one on the lies about 9/11, I'm just so amazed that this stuff can go on. Eddie Harris and I spent a lot of time watching and concentrating on all this information and then you sit back and you watch how the entire economy of America is run by drug money. So if you stop drugs, if you legalize drugs, what happens? That's why they don't.
The Taliban cut the production of heroin,
Right.
okay?
And that's why we
What
have to
do
start a war.
Americans know about Islamic people? What does the average person in the United States know about the Islamic
They
people?
pray-
They don't know anything.
They
about
pray 5 times a day.
Okay? They don't know anything about them. When I was in London 3 years ago, as part of a sacred music tour, and we spent 3 weeks traveling with sheikhs from Egypt and Morocco and different places. And they confessed. One man said, you know, I was raised to hate Americans.
Right.
He says, but what we also do understand is the difference between you all and those other Americans. He says,
Okay.
but we really know that we were being indoctrinated in the wrong way. And in the United States, Americans have to realize propaganda is used against us here in this country.
All the time.
Okay? It's used against us in this country. Now, the purpose of 9/11, as I said before, is to prepare and to set a mindset in the people. The 2,380 some odd people that lost their lives tragedy, but they're called collateral damage. This is business to these people.
Right.
It's business.
What happens when the people find out the truth?
Most people would not believe. They would not believe that the government and certain elements of the government were behind this. They wouldn't even believe it because they're so caught up, they're so brainwashed in thinking that America is something great. God and America don't even exist in the same sentence.
Well,
They
America of today.
Okay? They don't. And we need to understand this. You got all these televangelists running around, American flags and God and Jesus. You can't put the two of them in the same box. You can't mix the devil and God and say that it's one. It's not the same.
Well, what do we do about it?
The only thing that we can do is present information to people,
Like
just
we're
as
doing
the
here.
agent was doing on that tape.
All right.
Now, you can lead the horse to water, but believe me, when the well runs dry and they're thirsty, they'll come back and they'll say, well, gee, I remember hearing something some time ago about this. I remember a guy saying something about that. They're preparing people's minds to accept, number one, the people were dumb enough. This guy, Ashcroft, said that slavery was not that bad a deal for black people.
Who said that?
Ashcroft.
Ashcroft?
Ashcroft said it.
Not,
Okay?
not recently.
He said that during this administration.
During this
You
administration?
got to understand, George Bush, the
that
father.
came out of his mouth
Yes.
while he was Attorney General?
Yes, George Bush, when he
Get
was
out.
running in 1980, had 4 or 5 Nazis, former World War II Nazis,
his
working
fa-
in his
well, his
campaign.
father.
This, I'm talking about
Oh,
George.
okay.
And plus the father, the senator,
Yeah.
supported the Nazi cause.
What was his name?
He was a financier.
Prescott.
Prescott Bush. U.S. Senator.
Right.
Okay?
Prescott Bush,
It's
your
George Bush's
president's
father.
granddaddy, helped supply monies to support Hitler.
And continued to do so after Pearl Harbor.
Wow.
Okay?
That's a hell of a
There were no
Wait a
questions
minute, that's,
asked
you
about
know,
this.
heard what we just said?
There were no questions
I mean,
asked
did you
about that.
hear what I just said? The granddaddy of our president supported Hitler.
Precisely.
But people don't know that.
Because they don't read.
Okay. Well, you heard it here.
You know, they'd rather watch BET and music videos
Right.
or listen to a CD.
Right.
Because they'd rather tune out the reality because they don't want to know the truth. Now, the people of this country, the senators, your congressmen, have co-opted to this fascist president and this attorney general by saying that under the guise of the Terrorist Act, we should forsake certain constitutional rights and privileges. Because when you give up your rights and privileges, you don't get them back. All right? I work for the city of New York. When we negotiated over labor contracts, you give up something to the city, you're not getting it back. That's gone. You think, and you can be foolish enough to allow the federal government to have the right to do wiretaps on quote-unquote people who are deemed to be terrorists. Who the devil is to determine what a terrorist is? How is it that under the word terrorist you don't see the United States government? Who was it that chose to drop a bomb at Nagasaki, at Hiroshima, but they never chose to drop a bomb in Europe?
In Germany.
Not on white people. They wouldn't do that. But then they'll bring the experiment from Japan here to see, well, let's see how good this thing was, and let's look at radiation burns under the guise of a humanitarian effort. And we're going to treat these people because we really want to know how we can further perfect this bomb. Okay? We will use a program and give some black men who have syphilis a placebo. And we will allow them to be
Tuskegee?
this Tuskegee experiment. We will allow them to die under the guise of medical research. Okay? National Institute of Mental Health. And the drugging of our children with Ritalin and other drugs under the guise of special education programs. This is the United States government. But you have blacks and Latino boys who are expendable because you're taking advantage of these single parents, these young ladies who don't have an education, who are told that for the welfare of their child, they have to They better have that boy get his medication, because if not, the child will be taken from them or they'll be arrested.
Talking about ACH, Administration for Children's Services,
Right.
stealing kids, $2
Because,
billion
was it
budget.
Scarpetta who used to run that?
Well, he's
all right?
fire commissioner.
And now he's
now.
the fire commissioner. All right?
What's that about?
But
Well, let's go back to the Twin Towers. I want to concentrate on that. Now, through your experiment, I'm sorry you didn't get to see this piece, because this guy really, what's his name again? Mike Rupert. We might, Ed's in the wings here. Him and I sat and watched the piece again yesterday. Do you have that second roll-in ready? Maybe we can roll that in and we'll come back at you. How much time we got? Well, we got to go to half?
20 minutes.
We're at 20 minutes. All right, run 5 minutes of that piece, and we'll come right back at you. I want to get Ed on the set and see if we can talk a little bit more about this piece. And we'll further get you involved with, you want to do that? Nat, can we run that piece? Or we have a problem with the audio? Okay. We're live now. Can we do it?
Just in March of this year, we had a wonderful piece of evidence come up from Senator Carl Levin's minority report to the Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations, and it was a report on correspondent banks and money laundering. Now, this is a story from the Washington Post dated February 5th. It says, inattention and disinterest by U.S. banks in screening the foreign banks they take as clients has allowed rogue foreign banks, not rogue, and their criminal clients to carry on money laundering and other criminal activity in the United States and to benefit from the protections afforded by the safety and the soundness of the U.S. banking industry, said Senator Carl Levin of Michigan. Specifically mentions J.P. Morgan Chase. On the next page, 4,000 offshore banks to launder money into the United States, $1 trillion laundered annually. That's conservative. Money laundered in which the Clinton administration declared a national security threat. Not true. It's a national asset as far as Wall Street is concerned. Carl Levin said $500 billion moved through the U.S. banking system in drug money every year. That's liquid cash. And you want to know how important liquid cash in this world? There's a saying. One of my dear friends and colleagues and mentor, Catherine Austin Fitz, is a former Assistant Secretary of Housing. She was a managing director of Dillon Reed on Wall Street. She says cash flow is everything. And in an economy that's on the verge of a major implosion, without cash flow, the crash is guaranteed. Now, CIA's role is to make sure that as much of that drug money comes through the U.S. economy as possible.
When I was a little girl, I grew up at 48th and Larchwood in West Philadelphia, and the Solari Index was 100%. The Solari Index is the index that I use to describe the well-being of a neighborhood. It's the percent of people in a neighborhood who believe that a child can leave their home, go to the nearest place to buy a popsicle, and come home alone safely. It was unthinkable that a child wasn't safe at 48th and Larchwood in West Philadelphia in the 1950s. The Solari Index was 100%, and the Dow Jones Index was probably about 500. Today, it's reversed. The Dow Jones Index is very high at about 10,000, and the Solari Index is at very low in West Philadelphia and very low throughout the United States. And why is that? It's because one of the ways that we finance the growth of multinational corporations and big banks and the rise of the Dow Jones is by selling narcotics to our children. It's one of the most profitable businesses in America. About a year ago, I gave a speech called How the Money Works on Organized Crime to a wonderful group of people in Philadelphia. They have a conference every year. They go off into the woods for about 3 days and talk about how they can help our culture, our world, spiritually evolve. So I gave my presentation on how the money works as organized crime, describing what is arguably the biggest, most profitable industry in the United States today. And towards the end, we were discussing the fact that the Department of Justice estimates that the United States is the leader in laundering organized crime profits of about $500 billion to $1 trillion a year. So I asked the audience, what would happen if we stopped being the worldwide leader in laundering $500 billion to $1 trillion a year? And they said, well, you know, if we stopped, our mutual funds would go down in price, the stock market would crash. I said, well, what else would happen? So they said, well, you know, we might have trouble financing the government deficit because, in fact, the people who control 50 years of accumulated profits, that's a lot of capital that we need to finance our deficit. So I said, okay, well, I'll tell you what, let's pretend there's a big red button right up here on the lectern right in front of me. And if you push that button, you can stop all organized crime in America, and you can stop America laundering
See? Now this is the evidence that I wanted to present to you. This is where I get all these ideas from. The woman says $500 billion. Now, if we stop the drug circulation tomorrow, the U.S. economy would collapse. Now just imagine. So that's the justification for the CIA dealing in drugs.
Well, let me ask you a question. So I think that the issue now becomes, if this is how the American economy is sustained, how does the American people feel about this?
Well, that's why we're presenting the information.
You know, I mean, because if we're
Welcome
saying,
to the show, Ed Harris.
Oh, okay. I mean, because if that's what it takes for us to make our money, to be the big boys on the block, then fine. But say that, and all the non-violent drug offenders, they need to let out of prison.
But then you have the upstate economy fall apart.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think that if you set up a situation where people can make money, you know, in the little pawn shops, little smoke shops, the little, you know, little smoke bars like they have in Amsterdam, it widens the tax base. So
you know, in Colombia, in Cali, Colombia, the drug dealers, the city was built on drug money.
Mm-hmm.
Great schools. The elderly have no concerns with regard to their health care. They can go in any hospital, get the best health care possible, because the drug dealers is sustained by it. You see, but here in this country, and I'm not condoning that, don't get me wrong, but in this country, it's about the broadening gap of the have and the have-nots. It's about using, I was going to use the N word and the S word, but we need to understand and have it clear in our minds of what they see us as. We know who we are. We know what we are. We know our ancestry, which predates them on the earth. But because they hold certain powers and purse strings at this time, this is where they are. The only way that we can bankrupt this system is to get it in our heads that because this devil puts that stuff out there, doesn't mean we have to pick it up. We are not flies.
Amen.
We don't have to eat their filth.
All right. You want to go over the Illuminatis? A film that we've all seen.
Well,
I mean, I don't see the difference. I mean, ever since Kennedy was killed, it seems like this whole Texas mafia has come in and little bit by little bit just kind of taken over.
Texas Mafia, you're talking about?
I'm talking about the Bush clique. You know, Lyndon Johnson was from Texas.
Right.
You know, I mean, I don't know. And it's really funny because a lot of that stuff happened before I even got here, before I was on the scene. So, you know, a lot of times I end up, you know, looking at my elders, and I'm kind of like, all right, when they rolled on the Panthers, when they started rolling on these people, were we so caught up in trying to assimilate that we didn't say, wait a second, no, we're not going to take
I
this?
thought
or what?
integration would work.
Oh, most of us
I
thought
thought
that
integration would work. There were some decent people out there. I mean, we had a good America. America used to be a decent place. You had to understand the way America.
So we thought.
Oh,
Right.
yeah. I mean, they had
Right.
me so brainwashed. I joined the Marine Corps.
Right.
You know, when Eisenhower was president, Eisenhower warned everybody about the industrial complex. All right? Eisenhower, general. All right? War. I practically won World War II. Well, they claimed it. Well, he did. He was a good man. He became president for 8 years.
Played
And we had
golf.
yeah, we had a decent America. He wasn't too much on civil rights, but you know, but you can't ask for everything. We're happy.
Probably
that
ask
it
for
was a
everything.
decent-
I don't think black people have ever been in a position in this country where we can just say, oh, well, it's not as bad as it used to be, or you know, you couldn't get everything. I mean, we have never been in a position where we have been able to just act and be first-class citizens.
And you never will.
Right. So if that's the case, then what do we say to the young hip-hoppers who are like, you know, screw this, screw the schools, you know, forget the cops, I'm just going to do my thing? I mean, where is
understand-
the junction of hope?
Well, they
Where
have to
do we-
understand that they're doing the Amos and Andy routine that we had to do years ago.
Right.
They're just entertaining. They're
Right.
not doing anything concrete. They're,
Right.
they're rolling the dollar around. I mean, they're doing anything substantial. They're supplying, you know, underwear to their people. They should be taking those dollars and building towns,
Right.
buying land.
But I think that's why they get them. I mean, Jay-Z is willing to spend, for instance, I just heard that he's spending 3 times as much as the place cost up in the Hamptons, because they didn't want to rent to him, so he paid 3 times as much just to prove that he could still be there.
See, but that's foolishness. Don't understand what to do with their money. You see, you don't give your money, and you don't have to prove anything to somebody who you already know hates your guts.
Right.
You need to understand who your enemy is and deal with him accordingly. You don't give him your resources.
Right.
You don't give him the time of day.
Right.
And look what they're getting money for, to act like a gangster.
Right. And well, my thing is this:
Disrespect
that's
our
why they
women?
are getting the money. They're not going to give the money to anybody who's got any level of consciousness. I mean, why would you do that?
Look at
Why would you-
Rifkin and this whole rap thing. When you go back looking at Run DMC, KRS-One, those guys were not talking the nonsense that these guys are talking today. So they had to be gotten off the scene, all right? And it was white people that brought gangster rap and all this East Coast, West Coast nonsense into
promoters,
existence.
white
Right?
promoters.
White promoters, all right? You need to understand that. And Russell Simmons has profited, you know, and he's doing some things, good for him, but he doesn't fully understand the history of music. He doesn't understand black history in its fullest context. And we have to teach him. He needs to know that, yes, he has a great company, but it was Sam Cooke, who was the first artist to produce his own work,
right.
to make sure that his money came back to him.
Right.
But these guys, you know, there were number bankers in the 50s that from their operations sent black kids to college. That's what they did with their money. They established businesses, dry cleaners, grocery stores, and other things in the black community to provide jobs for black people
You know
and
what?
to get them into a mindset of entrepreneurship.
You know what I like to see that all these guys do? Help supply us and help us start our own television station, so we can beam up to the planet and tell them all the truths about America, all right, and about our history. You know, all the information that we have that we can spread to the world.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
I think our biggest obstacle right now, though, is the need for white approval.
No, we
See,
don't.
No, I'm telling
Forget
you.
it.
No, man, I'm telling you.
Eddie,
Everything is
forget
kind of
about
based.
him.
Everything is
Forget-
kind of based on.
No.
Okay, how does this look to the greater?
No.
You know, to the
That's not
dominant
what we're
culture?
doing here.
No, but
I'm
I
not
mean,
asking for approval from anybody.
I
I'm just
understand
giving
that, but this,
people
I
the
mean, but this
truth.
ain't NBC either. I mean, we got to, you know,
Well, it
keep
should
it in.
be.
We got to keep it in context.
It's our NBC. I don't have a sponsor looking over my shoulder telling me what to say and do. I doubt if any place else we could talk about this on public, public. Thank God for Manhattan Neighborhood Network.
Bill Cosby couldn't buy NBC.
Right?
All right? There's no way in the world they're going to let a Negro
That's right.
own NBC.
And what can we do with NBC? But they're controlled by the corporation.
But you have BET, you had a black man that owned BET, and he didn't know what to do with that.
Right.
Robert
Because
Johnson.
in his mind, in his sick, demented, capitalistic mind, it was all about money.
Right.
All right? He had no consciousness as a black man with regard to his people or his community. And what does he do with it when he wants to divest himself of it? He sells it to a company that has proven that they have nothing but disdain for black people.
Right.
So that's, and you can't blame the people
Right.
that bought it. You can only blame the man that sold it to them.
Right.
And as soon as they bought it,
Absolutely.
who's the first person they got rid of? Travis Smiley.
Travis Smiley. Travis Smiley.
Right.
Why? Because
only guy-
anything that makes sense, you got to
Right.
get rid of.
Oh,
Yes.
absolutely.
You know, and the booty shaking increased tenfold.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why? Because the young people like it. It's sexual. It appeals to their animal instinct. There's no intellectual appeal to that.
Right.
But get you to think about sex and
But let's look at it this way. White people have the same problem. See, because they're caught up in this terrorist stuff. They're caught up in this rah, rah, rah America. They have been conditioned to.
right. It's their
See,
tax dollars supporting all this.
When the hatchet falls, and when everybody wakes up, the most shocked people are going to be white people in this
Yeah.
country.
I believe it.
Because they're
I
going to
really
find
do.
out that America is not there anymore.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
This is not a democracy. What happened? Your rights have been,
Can
you have
imagine-
relinquished
can
all
you
of your
imagine-
rights
can you
because
imagine
you want
being-
us to protect you. And
we're
protect
gonna
you
have-
from who? The
we got
same
2
people
minutes
that were
left.
attacking you.
Right, in the first
So you
place.
should have been.
right?
Yeah. We're going to do this next week, and next week I'm going to show you more of this piece. We're going to get more into what we're doing because I don't have a live show next week. We'll have a tape.
Okay.
Maybe we can do part of the tape today. But what we're talking about is now, what if you were a hardworking white person, not a racist, just believe in America's dream and all this stuff, and you come to find out the CIA is behind all this.
Or even worse than that.
Or
Let's-
have a relative in the World Trade Center.
Oh, even worse than that. Let's say your whole community, church-going people doing your thing, everybody's, doing what they're supposed to do,
Wow.
and you look up and your pension and your 401k is gone.
Ooh.
Gone.
You better be careful when
More
you walk
about
down the
this,
street.
The
The bodies will be falling.
Yeah.
More about this next week. I'm sorry we only have an hour this week. Well, I have a few more minutes. Any other comments, gentlemen?
Well, the Illuminati, there's a lot there because the Illuminati goes back to the 1700s.
Right.
It comes out of Europe, and the Illuminati was hidden within the Masonic order, within Scottish Free Rite Masonry. And I'm not saying that Scottish Free Rite Masonry or the Masonic order is run by the Illuminati, but the Illuminati entered to hide themselves from the public. They entered the Masonic order. As a matter of fact, the popes of Rome forbade any Roman Catholic from joining the Masonic order at one point in Europe because of the infiltration of the Illuminati. And the Illuminati are anti-government, they're anti-religion, they are a select, secret group of people within that secret society
So the
of itself.
Bushes and their cross and bones, which we got out of that piece on Illuminati, they're really, what can we call that?
They're part of it. They're part of it. Now,
Okay.
Bush talks about born-again
Well, you
Christian.
can't
Yeah,
be a
great.
president without being a Mason.
No, you can't. And I'm not, I can't, I have no heaven or hell to put George Bush in, his father, his grandfather, any of them. But the fact is that they also run with Sun Myung Moon, who is a known drug dealer throughout
We got to
South
wrap
America.
it up.
That's right.
We're off the air?
This has been
Speak up. This has been a Gilchrist Experience. I'm getting 20 different cues here. We're going to have you start using cards. 30 seconds? Oh, 30 seconds. Well,
I think it's interesting
you
how,
for
how we
coming.
got a hold of this tape too.
Yes,